everyone. Welcome to another edition of StarSound Speaks, episode 91. Woot woot. This is your host, Irliana Samsara. And guess what? We got Demetrius back as promised. Demetrius Bagley, yay, live from New York City. I'm so excited because for those of you who haven't met Demetrius, who are new to the channel, he is amazing. And we're going to talk, we got some really cool, juicy things lined up for everybody today. And we, just by way of introduction, I'm just going to grab my, what happened to my thing? Oh, where did I go? Just a second. Okay, I got it. All right, I grabbed my intro. Okay, so this is who Demetrius is for the world, and then I'll say who he is for me. All right, so Demetrius is an award-winning movie producer, vegucated, and he is a nationally recognized events producer. And he's a longtime astrologer. So how many people can fit that bill? Astrologer, producer, very rare niche here. He's been published in Vibe magazine. He's been incredibly active volunteering for more than 30 astrologer conferences, serving on the NGCR, which is the National Council for Geocosmic Research, board of directors, project coordinating an anthology book called Astrology, The New Generation, and manages the International Society of Black Astrologers, and much more. Demetrius produces astrology and media and events, including the recent and groundbreaking Queer Astrology Conference 2020. If you remember last summer, I interviewed Vanessa Montgomery there and Demetrius afterward, QAC. It's going to be happening again, of course, this year. And also he produces talks and panels through Astrology Brooklyn and the podcast Stars on Fire. So welcome back, Demetrius. Yay.
Yay, thanks for having me. I'm glad for you to take a study break.
Right. Now, you know, it's interesting how I felt to reach out to you anyway. It was due for another visit. And then, of course, the big Meghan Oprah interview happened in Jejung in the wake of this first Saturn-Uranus square, right? And anyway, I know I want to get into all the really cool, exciting projects that you're here to share. And also just to say who you are for me is you're always on the front lines. You're always, it's that edge, you know? I mean, many people in the world who don't know astrology think astrology is edgy. You're not only in astrology deeply in production, but then you're on the edge of that with Black astrology, queer astrology. You know, these are like so vital. This is, I feel, where the rubber meets the road. And this is where I see this huge, much of this huge explosion happening is on those fronts. So I'm just really glad that you're back here and giving us an update and everything that you're working on. But I just thought I'd lead with talking about Harry and Meghan and, you know, like, what is your feeling about all that, you know, coming out of this, you know, I just think of last year we had, you know, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, many others, of course, George Floyd being the big, right, the big galvanizing influence. And now it's like the other side of this bookend to 2020 is them sharing what they went through in the palace and the racism and the institutional racism and the colonialism and all of those influences, and how it nearly killed her. I mean, it's pretty scary. So anyway, I just wanted to ask you, you know, how are you feeling coming out of all that?
How am I feeling, which is definitely different, right? Moon and Cancer, than I'm thinking. I was surprised at how much rage I felt after sleeping into Monday, after watching this. It's an interview, right? But there's so much more for me as an astrologer, big air quotes here, mundane astrologer. I'm not there yet, but maybe in the next 2 or 3 years with some more studies. I see a lot of astrologers, a lot of non-Black astrologers, looking at her chart. Her data's out there. Meghan's, Oprah's is certainly out there, and Harry's is also out there. I haven't dug and won't dig too deep into it, because what I got from the interview, right, which is just a long interview, I don't remember without looking how long a lot of I think Oprah's sort of not mentor. I'm thinking of Barbara Walters, but I think we get a 2-hour special, but we get 3 interviews. Is sort of the practice that when Barbara did those specials on ABC once upon a time. I don't think Oprah's ever done a, or maybe she has with Michael Jackson, 2 hours. It's uncommon, at least in the U.S. How do I feel? I'm not sure today. I definitely felt a lot of rage Monday and Tuesday after the interview. And that wasn't just about the monarchy or their situation, or even situations, if I can say it that way. It was and you've highlighted it really nicely with the Saturn-Uranus square, the first of the three we're coming off of. We're at a moment that I thought well before any of this came onto my radar, this interview, where and it's part of this Saturn-Uranus square, we're choosing how much of the old we want to keep, right? And old here maybe 2,000 years old, maybe longer, but probably not much more recent than that. And this new, but new has to, right, in a very Capricorn Aquarius way, even though we're talking about squares between Aquarius and Taurus, new has to keep some of what's there, right? It's not just going to sort of appear out of thin air. No pun intended with that mention of air. I'm already thinking about that because, right, we came off of 2020, and it's very clear a great portion of the Western world does not work for the people, right? And that's an issue. I'm not a Brit, so I'm not sure how they want to speak to it, black or not. But in the US, I'm like, these documents aren't matching up with what we've been through collectively in the last almost 250 years here, right? The USA Pluto return is, barely 2 years away. For sure, we're going to talk about race, right? Because this is part of the history of the US, and not just with Black folks, but certainly Native folks to this land, or even to this nation I was thinking, but really this continent and elsewhere in the world. So I felt a lot of rage, and that was surprising. And I'm still unpacking how that is about the powers that be, and also the specificity, right, of their story. Right, this is the top, right, in the UK, if not the, their their portion of the colonized world.
Mhm.
And right, he's not next in line to the throne and that whole bit.
Mhm.
But there's a way that he and his child, right, and their child, Archie, and maybe even child to be their fourth, their daughter, going with that, or the second child, I'll say, they weren't able to negotiate sort of anything. And none of that was, so the interview wasn't surprising to me at all. There was nothing that was said that surprised me at all. I maybe raised an eyebrow here or there. I'd have to go back through the transcript to even think about. I thought some of the way it's cut, where Oprah says what and she's looking, I was like, is that a response to this? Because Oprah's been around, right, for a minute and knows, all the celebrities,
Sure.
and certainly has spoken with them off camera, etc. Um, I think part of my rage is feeling, when are we toppling this, right? Gen X here, but definitely was identifying with millennials a lot Monday and even into Tuesday about, okay, maybe we do burn it all down. Maybe we do raise it. And I won't go off on the tangent of why I have trepidation and just questions about that. I want somewhere to cook my food and cancer. We can have the revolution, but let's keep, some of these buildings, physical buildings, do actually function in quote unquote any sort of benevolent sense of the world. That's all heavy. I want to come down and shout out Janelle and Mecca that I produced their podcast, but
Yes.
you don't hear me on it at all. I'm doing a lot of the technical in the background, and some of the administrative work to keep the podcast going. It's basically a mundane astrology podcast. It's two Black women, both Sagittarians, both native New Yorkers. They talk about it on the last episode, which we just recorded ahead of Oprah's the release of that interview with Meghan and Harry, and so they dive more into some of the royal family's charts. That for me, including Meghan. I don't think we talked about Archie's chart. Shout out to Black astrologer Zach Powell on Twitter, has a thread just looking at a piece. Right, there's a lot of people just in the royal family. We don't know these charts or names. I don't think of the people that work for the institution.
Right.
And or the firm. I don't know how
The
this.
firm. Right.
And Umi Genevieve, another Black astrologer, also dug in for a different and longer thread that's out there. So those are out there, and I think it's very important for folks to check out what Black astrologers and Black women astrologers are saying here. I think there's a lot of I know there's a lot of misrepresentation, which I think came up a little bit in when it's just Meghan and Oprah on the patio there, or whatever it is. That we understand their voices and their life experiences better than ever, because when we do well collectively for Black women, usually everybody is taken care of because of the way the hierarchies that would be are. What did I think about the interview? Moving on from how I felt about it, right? Which again, I'm still unpacking. Or less about the interview, I guess. How I felt about the interview is what this phrase goes through my head a lot in the last so many months. Certainly related to lockdown slash hashtag stay at home. Release valve, and how that relates to Instant Pot, which I have an Instant Pot, but also metaphorically how it relates to this new age of air. And if Earth is the tightest of the four elements, arguable, that air wants to be out and free and open, and certainly a lot of us want that in various degrees a year into this pandemic. So I I was really excited. If I'm not mistaken, Megan's a Leo sun.
Yes.
Oprah for sure is an Aquarius. So
Yes.
there was, I thought it was going to be all three of them most of the time. It's the flip, right? It's the two ladies for the majority of the time, and Harry comes in, which I also thought was very powerful um, racially, right? Because there's a lot of things going on there without me trying to unpack them. I also want to identify for people who may not have dialed into it. I got this, was reminded of this of Clubhouse, but I was thinking of it lightly before the interview. This is pretty major, right? You know, and we know Oprah is Oprah, queen of interview media, talk show media, right? The next generation after Barbara Walters, in my mind.
Right.
They spoke to Oprah, right? And at length and pretty openly, right? She's got a Sag, I always forget if it's the midheaven or I think it's Virgo midheaven and Sag rising for Oprah, right? So there's an openness in space, but there also was a boldness, right, to some of the questions that Oprah asked, that the questions weren't pre-screened, which I think is very unusual, particularly at this height of I don't know if I say celebrity, but fame. Let me say that. For me, the interview indicated, and again, I love that you're attaching it to the first Saturn-Uranus square we'll see this year, just coming off of, right? It's not exactly to the minute or even day there. I think this interview sort of said this, and I think Harry's comments in particular, when it comes on late in the time, this doesn't work. I already know, right? Very dramatically and quite literally deadly, right? His thinking about his mother. This does not work. You know, whatever else is or isn't happening behind the scenes, this does not work. And so instead of me suffering through it or harming myself, or them doing a Romeo Juliet or whatever, let's go to the U.S. You have dual citizenship. Let's go back over. I know a few people. I know the prior president,
right,
2 presidents ago, or actually both. The Biden as well as Obama, and I think actually he's even met Trump, if I recall. Right, and have some pull and some numbers, and so they do that. And there was a way that I think it's very important in the context of the pandemic, and certainly the paradigm or paradigms to live under, to understand how we are happy and enjoy. I feel like that's really challenged in the US. That's not new. Europeans commented on a lot.
Hey, hold on just a second. I'm just getting a low battery. I forgot to plug hold that thought just a second. I'm going to pause. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Just a little battery charge.
No worries. I mean, that's part of what I think we're under on a larger scale with this pandemic, is a dial back, tune in to households, certainly our own persons,
Mhm.
other people in our lives, our community, neighborhood, and. I think this interview represents pretty high up there, right? Again, as far as the hierarchy of fame, this does not work. This paradigm wants to overtake their well-being, their safety, for the two of them, right? Sort of understood coming in with the racial dynamic with Meghan from the beginning for some of us. But even he, right, with this history, this very particular history, he can't get any sort of security at a certain point because he's not playing the game from where I'm sitting, right? As a black queer person in the U.S. And something he was aware of, if I understood his comments right, but he hadn't experienced directly, and so he experiences directly, quote unquote, a year ago, right? Heading into this pandemic and then if not right before. And
Right.
then all of a sudden, I think he has enough education and privilege, and says as much in the interview. Oh, we have to make some different choices here, right? This is not happening. This is a fantasy, right? Neptune and Pisces, I think a little bit. Okay, well, we're not going to be just out here. I've got this money from my mother. You have connections. I have connections, right? You know how the U.S. or North America works, and that's all I think sort of spelled out. I think it also is gosh, I'm not even sure how to articulate. I'll leave that there. I think there's more to this story.
Mm.
I encourage people to consider, what if she 100% told the truth, or let's say 99%, right? Because there's a lot of questions, particularly from astrologers, but even in the media in the UK, probably in the US if I look for it. Oh, I don't know if she's telling the truth.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't understand why people would even ask that.
Well, this is part of child, right? If we're trying to uphold this paradigm, or maybe plural, of white supremacy, of patriarchy, of the institution, of the firm, right? You start, right? We've just seen this at a pretty expert level with the GOP and Trump and co. Is you start playing back and distorting things, right? And that was
Um,
what um, it didn't surprise me, actually disappointed me, but made me laugh in a very dark, ironic way. Oh no, I didn't make her cry, right?
yeah, yeah.
She made me cry.
Me cry.
And no, I
Yeah.
won't go deeper into it. I'm going to show some boundaries and/or class here, what have you. But that I didn't expect that. I can definitely say that. Aquarius here, Sun. Sometimes this what surprises most people doesn't
Doesn't
surprise
surprise you.
Aquarius. But
Right.
usually, like very small, mundane things do, or choices people make, those surprise me. But usually, big things, I'm kind of like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
For the most part, and yes, there's things happening with Uranus on my chart, regardless of what rulership people may use.
Tauranus, like here's another, we were talking about veganism with as part of Tauranus. Now this is another face of Tauranus, Taurus, Uranus and Taurus, in case if anybody hasn't heard that new little catchphrase, Tauranus. It's like Uranus and Taurus and all the outrageous shifts, paradigm shifts happening. Oh, excuse me. That was my cat. So, pardon me.
Hello, Kitty.
I'm kidding.
I think we saw a little bit of hashtag Tauranus in the interview when we went into the chicken coop, not from a vegan standpoint.
Oh yeah, they rescued the chickens. I know.
This
That was
idea of
Tauranus.
rescuing, and also he makes a comment, and I don't know what's there, and I haven't seen the extra footage that was the next day. Maybe I'll dive into that or not. Part of me wants to go back to the interview and just see, or maybe a transcript and look at the patterns of words, thinking about the astrology and where the outer planets are, and maybe even all of the planets. But I, again, not vegan, but I don't think he's had that sort of access, that openness where he could have a chicken or chickens, right? And chickens are very particular creatures if you interacted with them.
She couldn't even have her driver's license. That was scary. It's like you're like a prisoner. Like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
weird.
It. Why do you say it's weird?
Because like then she can't, I mean, okay, maybe her license isn't valid. Her American license is not valid overseas, unless there's some stipulation, because Americans drive and rent cars for tourism, but it was just weird. Her passport, it's like, we're taking away everything. And it's just scary. Then you're like completely dependent on them. That would make me really feel vulnerable, you know? And
I think
anyway.
there's a way that so that didn't, make me bat an eye. A little bit more detail than I had before, at least remembered. To me, that was, and part of what this whole, not just interview, but their whole experience, which is I'm still unfolding, right? Is, are you going to be who you are, right? Their charts, big air quotes there as an astrologer, and many biases. Or are you going to be a company gal, a company guy, a company person, institution, firm, whatever? And we've seen this in a lot of, I think, spy films, and the ex-spy and the former, and this co-option. I think I can use that if I'm using that word correctly. And Megan, right, this Leo sun, this mixed race, parentheses, black woman, from where I'm sitting, obviously from quote unquote American from the US. No, this doesn't make me feel good. This actually makes me feel suicidal, right? I don't need this. I already saw what happened to Diana, right? We're not next in line, right?
Yeah,
Why are we, I gave up all these, documents, which are quite valuable if we think about them in a global context, not just UK or US. And a global, these are I'm thinking of the passport in particular. This is very valuable, or used to be before the last president. I think it's rebounding some with the Biden-Harris administration. She knows, I hesitate to say better, which I think comes up, that word between them and Oprah, but she knows differently. She knows freedom. And there are echoes, right, of this, why the US broke away from the Brits, parentheses, and
sure.
France. And we're coming on that anniversary in astrology way, this Pluto return. I don't know if I have much more that I have processed and can share about the interview, other than it's important. It's going to come back, what it represents, right? I think we'll hear more about their story, and maybe we'll see with the, right, that was the first pass. It's going to come back. I don't know if you said, it's 11 degrees, I think, is the second square, and 13 is the last. But they might lose some traction, maybe not. I think that's June or July when we have the second Saturn-Uranus square. And then I think it's just Christmas Eve or
Yes,
thereabouts
yes.
that we
Christmas
have
Eve.
the last square. I don't know how that hits up Saturn-Uranus, how that hits up their chart. But this isn't the end of that story, right? Astrologically and otherwise, I think in 2021, I think we want to watch the conversations, and certainly the media spin from the left, political left, and also particularly the political right. We are moving out of a paradigm, folks. This Earth, this industrial age, which I would say is 200 years, without
Right.
parsing that out here. We are in the hashtag new age of air. And so relating and relationships are going to be different. They're going to be different. And we're going to have to put messy stuff on the table, which I think we spoke about last time I was here. Certainly I've spoken about it elsewhere, publicly and privately. I think the
Yeah, yeah.
challenge.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm thinking of like moving forward. Where would I like to see this go now that they opened this door and they showed us what was behind palace doors? Now it's like, how about being proactive and having symposiums or conversations for healing? Like how can we make this better? We're not privy now. The Queen's going to have private conversations. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. And maybe there's something there that collectively we could all, maybe I would love to see Harry and Meghan, have some like you were saying, or town halls, like let's talk about this, like not their situation, but just where people find this in their lives. I think that would be really cool. Like this is the opportunity for a huge breakthrough and a whole new level of relating. That's just how I see it.
I agree, and I think I saw a little bit of that already on Clubhouse last night. A lot of I don't want to parse out too much because I'm still chewing on it, but it was hundreds of people
and a couple dozen or a few dozen really on stage. And it was sort of this, pardon me, open mic led by a Black woman, I believe in the US, definitely in North America, if not US. Um, Black women in the US and the UK talking about, responding to this, and I said again intentionally, situation that Meghan and Harry are in, and Archie. And also, you know, what's their response to that in of itself? What does this mean in a bigger context? There's so many ways to look at this, but I think we just had a media moment, certainly for 2021 and probably for the decade, because at this height, right, he is, and Oprah's like, really? Trapped or prisoned or
Yeah.
imprisoned, or I think he said trapped.
Yeah, he said trapped.
Um, and I'm like, you know, he was Oprah, right? This is what I'm thinking. It's a very Black, I think, U.S. response. I don't know if the Brits do it to talk at the TV, right? I don't even have a TV anymore, but this here. And I thought, yeah, he felt trapped because literally, to a certain extent, his mother was, and then she wasn't, but maybe she was, and then she's gone. And this very strange death, I'll just say, and leave that there. Right. Shout out to Mecca again and conspiracy theories and Aquarius placements. Um, yeah, I think I totally agree that, and I was thinking this well before anything about this interview, more about grief, right? And the pandemic and COVID and many and trauma, right? This super common word, I think, in the last, at least from where I'm sitting, 2 or 3 years, and there's more. We've got to air out and unpack some of what's going on internally. You know, I don't know that you have. Per se, without hearing from you, whether that's by text or email or verbally or a book you write or whatever, but a communication that, you know, you want to, you know, go live in XYZ country for 4 months and just sit on the beach and, you know, stare at the stare at the waters and then listen to the waves and the tides. I'm just making something else, right? We don't really know fully who we individually are, much less who someone else is, without some sort of communications. And I think that the conversations, right? We don't necessarily talk, we're not supposed to talk about money, right? And income. So that's been blowing up in some fascinating ways on Twitter, particularly in this month, March, Women's History Month. We're not supposed to talk about sex, right? We're not supposed to talk about politics and religion. For sure, those things are discussed on social media, and part of why they're can be so volatile and tricky, but also fascinating and informative. But a lot of that silencing or that fringe or in the, you know, behind closed doors ends up propping up this whole institution or firm, right? One of the funny things to me and most notable is they're inviting the tabloids, not the newspapers, not the magazines, not the journalists, the tabloids, right? This gutter journalism, if I can call it that, to the palace every Christmas, right? And not all of them, right? They're in bed together, right? That was
Oh, yeah.
That I think was really important for us to start thinking about. That wasn't that fact was new to me, but that they were in bed together, that's, you know, that's old news for me. I didn't realize it was, you know, on their, not even on their doorstep, right, in their living room or whatever you call it at the palace. That to me immediately said, well, gosh, they're not only in bed together, they have a standing appointment, right? They are they're not necessarily good. Well, I guess they're not necessarily good for each other, but I think Oprah, someone says in an interview, they're symbiotic, and there's a lot behind that.
Right.
I won't
Yeah,
try to
yeah.
unpack there. That I knew.
Like a bad romance, as Lady Gaga would call it.
I
It's
think
a
it's
bad
even worse than that, or maybe I have to go back and look at the lyrics for Gaga. I think, well, Harry says it in the interview. I feel sorry for them that they haven't seen outside of uh I don't want to watch
Yeah,
my
they
words,
only know,
out of
that's
this
all they
bubble.
know. As Megan said, that's all they know. Yeah.
And I think that's true for a lot of us. I think what's fascinating to me in 2021, again, as a Black person, as a queer person, and certainly a citizen of the US, is I'm familiar already with some of the interrogation of what is and isn't happening here, that I think a lot of women listening will be very well aware of, maybe more aware of than I am in my those at least those two identities I have. And let me throw in Aquarian, this sort of outsider, sometimes insider, sometimes a combination of. But there's a way that they arguably called out, right? They're two millennials, if I'm not mistaken. Um, a lot of the levels of what's going on. I'm excited because I think her ferocity and her literally being a sun in Leo will help us move into the many, many, many messy. Not messy is not always bad, but right, we want to clean. Some of us want to clean it up, have those reflexes. Can get us through the. I was trying to think. I think it's the biblical valley of death, and then I don't know what the other part
Right.
is, but not death. But although it may feel scary and dark like that, and Plutonian air quotes or what have you, but we have to sometimes go through the chaos,
Right. To get to
the creative power,
right. The regeneration and the reinvention and the reprogramming.
and that's very much what we're under, barely weeks, really just days into this new era. Again, hashtag new age of air, where it's about relating. We're going to ask questions and answer them, hopefully, about equity, about equality, about egalitarian, right? About everybody having healthcare in the richest country in the world, or one of, about having housing for everybody. Which we can do now technology wise, about people being clothed and fed and so on. Again, card carrying Aquarius here. I don't necessarily push or urge people to watch the interview, but to really keep an ear, or if not both ears, on the conversations. Some of them are crap, around what just happened, and what all was. There were a lot of reveals there that again weren't really new to me. Some of the details were, but the general patterns of she was co-opted into this machine, right? And I use that word very intentionally there, and then wanted out and then got out, for a price. And was I think that price will become a little bit stronger in a moment or two. Yeah, it's very intriguing. I do want to note, what did you say? Regeneration, transformation. It's really important. Some of the things that I'm missing, and I think of these headlines are missing, because in some ways they are newspapers I'm talking about, not because these are tabloids, and I'm thinking of the U.S. Biden affirmed them being healed and coming out of this situation. I think by way of, I think it's Jen Psaki. Maybe I'm probably saying it wrong, but
Saki, is that, I don't know if they say the P, but like the little Japanese wine. I don't know. She's cool. Jen Psaki, the press secretary, the White House press secretary.
They've responded to this, I think, in a gentle way and sort of an indirect way. But right, is this not about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And for sure, right, Joe Biden being the Scorpio, and these very particular family stories of having to work through grief, and rebounding and moving forward, even in recent months. And also something I don't think we've seen enough of from leadership, certainly not the quote institution and the palace, is just this basic human thing of compassion. And I think I'll leave that there.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome. Yeah, compassion. This is how we, at first we, you said air. We have to air what's there, what has been there, and then it's moving us toward. It's all undertaken with compassion, and yeah, I just see only good things coming from this. And this may even reinvent, as you're saying this, Demetrius. I'm like wondering, and I'm definitely going to move on here to our wonderful content we have lined up here, but this I felt was very important. I think we're going to move, or we have the ability to move into, this could even reinvent the media. Like what's the media is always, these celebrity gossip stories, and it's all this, and gossip. And it's like now we can reinvent that. And like maybe the very purpose of a newspaper is not to just be this gossip central, but what, talk about the good things that are coming out of this and more of that. So I don't know. It's just an idea.
Well, I want to take that idea because I've been chatting with some non-astrologer friends about that. I think so. Astrologers have been talking about, and I don't know the basis of this. I haven't looked enough deep into it. I'm just sort of it's on my list, but it's lower on my list of what I'm listening to us astrologers talk about. That this star system, Hollywood star system, if I can call it that, but in a global sense, that will go away with Saturn in Aquarius, Jupiter, briefly there, and then Pluto in Aquarius. I think more. I don't know what the basis of that is, but if I'm not mistaken, it's about the Aquarius Leo access in this new age of hashtag new age of air. I think we saw some of that in a few ways in already in 2021, including this interview. Um, there are ways Meghan articulated. I think some of this was the after footage. Maybe I saw one clip on Twitter that was super brief, like 20 seconds. But what are we compromising about privacy, about ourselves, about self-ownership for these capitalist machines? I think there's a way that newspapers, for a long time, and newspapers are a relatively new invention. Let's keep that in mind in terms of decades. So I don't even think they're quote unquote 200 years old, give or take, right? Which is back to this Earth era. But I think
Right.
they
Yeah.
are very commercially motivated, right? They want to stay alive, like any entity out here. But I think what happens is they sometimes, or not sometimes, they often play to a human's baser instinct with
Yes.
the gossip, with the, I've subscribed to these things, I've bought them, I've read them, and still a little bit read them. But I'm also trying to uh, use this part of Aquarius where we, capital K here, know better and do better, right? Shout out to Michelle Obama and this do better. That's what's intriguing to me about this time in astrology's growing popularity and getting more Black astrologers, which we'll come back to in this conversation, being visibly and verbally a part of that. But yes, I think we are going to see new. So I've been parsing it this way. There are news outlets, there are media outlets, and certainly there are information businesses, and those can commingle. But what's important is, to me, is news is about facts, right? And I don't think they're ever 100% objective. I think humans need to be subjective. That's me looking at a lot of astrology charts, because we get our own flavor and our own nuances and our own understanding, and then can share that, right, as some sort of communication platform. I think media is more sort of interested in, let's say, entertaining, maybe air quotes, maybe not, depending on what we're looking at. And so I think CNN, sadly, has become this far from why it was created decades ago, and not just in this Trump era, as I'll call it, but even Obama running that first time, there was so much that was packaged and regurgitated that didn't have much substance. It reminded me of, and I still eat some of packaged food, Doritos, Cheetos, Pop-Tarts, and it didn't have nutritional value in the ways that, I'm old enough to know and remember bits of Walter Cronkite, and not news per se, definitely media, but Johnny Carson having a richer than not interview or exchange with
substance, depth, substance,
and maybe not as PR'd and as positioned to the album sales or the movies or the clickbait. Right. And I like those to a certain extent, but I think we have sacrificed facts for the dollar, right, or whatever the currency is. And so I'm intrigued with all these new email newsletters through Substack and Platformer, and I don't know all the platforms, but a lot of journalists a number of journalists, I don't know if I can say a lot yet, are being laid off, or just seeing they can have more control over the stories, the narratives that they want to, and that was something, I forget what Meghan said about it in the interview, but that's important, that we all have more access, if not agencies, at some level, not necessarily the highest levels as they now exist, to tell our stories. Because within all that, I think we can move way past and push out of the rearview mirror the institution, the firm, the B for my scandal fans, the B613, I think it is, if I remember the numbers right, and all of these mechanisms, machinations working behind the scenes that aren't about us, the everyday people. They are about a 1% or even a tenth of a percent, and this big tongue in cheek here, but Illuminati, this uber elite, no pun intended there. I want to rewind and lean forward and say, speaking of media makers and a news giant, that two Black Americans showed some compassion or heart, or so it looks like. I know there are accusations otherwise, particularly with Tyler Perry, but right, he gave them or rented, I don't know, least whatever it was,
His
his
house
estate and
yeah.
security.
And
Right,
security.
this key thing that comes out, security. I don't know if Harry and or Meghan have Cancerian placements. I do. I know a lot more about security
Yes.
in the last year and a half with the pandemic and the unpresidency.
Right.
Obviously Oprah is there too, giving them this space and time, not just to speak and to voice their own stories, but I think to sort of unpack, again, I think, I could be wrong, in some important ways. We collectively, humans, need to move on from these systems that don't make us feel good, aren't about our well-being.
Yeah. Nice. And here we are. We're on our way. This is going to be quite a year. Our first year in air since we've all been here. We won't live to be 200 to see it shift, but we're in the beginning of this. I'm
I said
excited.
that the other day to someone, and I'm not sure. Shout out to Wendy Stacy over in the UK. I think, if I'm not mistaken, is a Kiwi nationally. Two things. Why do I say that isn't necessarily important? I think there's a way, for me at least, Gemini rising, right, Sag on the other side of the horizon. It's good to locate where we are in the world, and there are a lot of ways that's going to continue to come up by way of millennials about how we positionality, I think, might be the word there. I'm not doing that here and owning that, but for me, because I'm not free to move around the cabin with these COVID-19 and these variants, I'm just like, where are people talking to me from? is a new thing I've been nudging. Wendy said and you had mentioned right before we started, 2018, the UAC conference, United Astrology Conference, which is the mothership conference with hundreds of astrologers from certainly all over the continent and really the world of North America.
Other galaxies too, probably.
Maybe other galaxies. The energy was that potent.
Galactic.
Going on and on about that. But this important talk about the 2020s are us coming as a decade, coming out of this very long-standing Earth era, right, that most of us are quite familiar with, particularly those of us over 20, right, and saw the prior Jupiter Saturn conjunction. And Earth to air, right, Taurus to Gemini, Virgo to Libra, Capricorn to Aquarius. That is many things, and it's something I encourage people who are esoteric to chew on. I'm still chewing on it. But the key thing that I want to relay that Wendy gave to me and many other astrologers in the room, and hopefully people have heard that recording of that talk. Earth to air is a massive speed change. So her premise in part was we all will have whiplash in and through this decade, because a lot of changes and things are brewing, not all good, by the way, are really just gonna have us head. Different conversation for a different day, but I went into UAC specifically, like, what are we saying, we astrologers, about 2020, 2021, certainly the US presidential election, and even other countries, but the 2020s, a lot there. And I would love for us to, and maybe Vanessa and a couple others right over from Australia to into before we get there, what Pluto going to Aquarius, Neptune going into Aries, Uranus going to Gemini,
Sure.
and that's what they're going into, not just where they're at. Obviously, probably by
What that
now,
would look like. Yeah,
the
that's
Pluto
exciting.
return for the USA. Um, yeah, I'll
Awesome.
leave that there. I
Yeah,
don't
because
think that
we got all
the
these I want juicy questions to ask you about.
I'm going to segue from there and say, I don't know that we'll see these news organizations change or evolve for the most part. I think it sort of contradicts their capitalist bent or mission. Not saying it couldn't happen, not saying I don't want it to happen. What I think we're going to see and already seeing a little bit from Clubhouse, right? The new social media hotness that's all audio based, which is easier for people in a lot of ways and less stressful, particularly through the pandemic. And I love that Zoom is here, even though I want a Pass the Rock feature and a couple other things. But I think we're going to see more people voicing themselves verbally and written and gesticulating and all these other ways, and certainly expressing themselves. And I want to jump a little bit for at least myself. One of the fascinating things we've seen in just not even the last year, particularly George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd forward, is a lot of pieces celebrating Black astrologers, Black chefs, Black vegan chefs, and you can go down the list with whatever else you've seen. I've seen some of it, but certainly not all of it. And multiple pieces from major outlets. If I'm not mistaken, Cosmo had a piece. I don't remember the number right there. Listicles. No pejorative there.
Oh, and Forbes too. There was the women, the Black and brown women, tarot and astrologers. I mean, it's Forbes. Like, that's pretty cool. Like
Well,
Forbes.
it's interesting. I want to lean here to a non-Black astrologer, but an Aquarian, Chris McCrae, an astrologer giant, and probably not for if people listening. If you're not an astrologer, you probably don't know her name. She may not seem important. Chris passed away, unfortunately, at the very end of 2020. Chris was 92, definitely a card-carrying Aquarius sun.
Wow, 92.
92 and was working, almost basically right up into her. She fell and then went to the very badly, and then went to the hospital and passed about a week, if I'm not mistaken, or 10 days after that fall. There's some more complications, which may or may not be COVID. We don't know. But she was 92, and an amazing energy. I'm lucky enough to have worked with her a little bit and spoke to her specifically about Mars at UAC 2018 in Chicago, this mothership conference we just talked about. But what I heard there that I kind of knew through her memorial, which was on Zoom, right, with people all over the world, right? She literally made a lot of inroads for astrology and astrologers all over the world. Is Chris won an award for professional image within the astrologers world. And she had Hollywood background I didn't know about, and Indian. She was Canadian. What I heard in part of the many loving tributes to her is how she helped just in this last 20 years, ironically, right? This Jupiter-Saturn cycle, particularly in the last 20 years, before that, but particularly in the last 20 years, very directly. Astrologers understand how we could be full-time and paid and have media appearances on this local Fox News station, on in the New York Times, make the deal with Netflix to have these YouTube videos. I'm thinking of one of the biggest names in air quotes here, among younger astrologers, Chani Nicholas, who is just doing thrilling things, including this app that is giving me,
Yes,
even for free, it's giving me notifications that are based on different aspects in the moon ingresses. Anyway, my mind is splitting me and Gemini in a few ways, but there was a lot that happened in this last astrological year that I hope to present on in the coming this month, later into March here, specific to Black astrologers. We've been here for decades, maybe centuries. I'm researching that for the film short, as you know, Black Astrologers yesterday, and
Yeah.
maybe have that short ready into 2022. Fingers crossed there, we'll see.
Yes.
But one of the things, thinking about right before you pinged me to come join you back on here, thank you again, is, well, what happened? What do I remember? Right. And some of that is just trying to keep my head screwed on, not necessarily straight, wink, wink, but screwed on very curious times and all these planets coming out of Aquarius and into Pisces and just this big pivot. I feel like the ship is the ship that may be Earth, I would say, or this time again. And I'm saying this intentionally, hashtag New Age of Air, but there were a lot. I got to, I think it was 18, including myself, and that's. And I know there are things I've forgotten because there was a lot in 2020 that I read and was trying to wrap my head around COVID and the census. I was a census enumerator, or wanted to be one, and they didn't call back. Then they finally did, and then that's a whole little story into itself, but a very worthwhile experience that I have it. But coming back to Chris and leaning forward more into Black astrologers today, astrologer is not a new profession, as you know, but it's expanding and shaping itself by way of ESAR, of NCGR, of Oprah. These are, you know, a few decades old. I think all of them are barely 50. They're all 50 years old, if that. I think is like,
Yeah, at the most. Yeah.
without unpacking these acronyms. AFA is, I think, 80 or 90 years old. I think just a little bit younger than Chris. I think it's a 1932 chart or something like that. That's the oldest, at least in the US, that I'm aware of, and biggest and most moneyed astrological organization out there. And they've had their own challenges, right? Very close to and really with the Saturn-Uranus, first Saturn-Uranus square,
Right.
precisely. And I'll jump from there and say, and really jump just in the last, I think it's about 100 days now, a little bit back into calendar 2020. We've seen some breakthroughs about Black astrologers getting more seats at the table for these astrological organizations,
Yes.
not just
Very
in the
exciting.
U.S. And a lot of them are U.S. based, even though they may say they're national in name or in discussion, including NCGR. But NCGR, and the fact of the matter, has chapters around the world, and 3 different continents, if not 4 or 5, or maybe even 6, without us parsing it out. ESAR certainly is international. The I is, excuse me, International Society for Astrological Research. That I has become way more international. I've been working with ESAR almost 6 years now, in 2 different capacities. It's even more international than ever. By way partially of the social media. There was
That'll
another
do
thing
it.
I was having there. A few things have happened. A few of the astro orgs that have elections. Clarissa Dolphin is now ESAR board director. That's important. Janae Anthony is on the AYA board. AYA is the association
Young astrologers, right?
for young astrologers, but welcomes all ages without unpacking that. Bear River and Storming Grace
Right.
served on the prior iteration of the AFAM steering committee. And one of the biggest is actually overseas, with respect to North American bias. Israel, I don't know how you say Israel's last name, Ajos, if and forgive me if I'm saying it incorrectly, became the president of the Astrological Lodge of London.
Oh, wow. That's like really old, and talk about tradition. That's like the
It,
granddaddy of them.
yeah, it's older than AFA, American Federation of Astrologers. If I'm getting my, again, I'm not
It
going
goes back to like Madame Blavatsky's time, you know, I think that the Astrological Lodge of London. Wow.
It does. I don't know a lot of the history, and there are at least 2 books on there. Alan Leo is a key name people may recognize, is a
Sure.
part of that founding. So that was pretty big, and he's been involved with the lodge. He was VP before that, but that's very big. And also, you know, I have to step outside of the USA bubble. or listen outside of it to get that. And then I want to rewind and shout out someone who checked on me and thank him for that in 2020 proper. Omari Martin, who's held many positions
Oh,
and
yeah.
continues to out in the Chicago area. But and this wasn't in 2020, but I didn't learn about it until 2020, and he and I were having some important private conversations, not quite like the Queen may be having in that family,
Right.
but and these are all Black astrologers that I'm very intentionally mentioning their names. He's the board president for Kepler College and has been for, I think, 2, 3, or more years. I didn't even know he's on the board, much less the president.
Wow, I didn't know
Right,
that either.
and I'm in the know, even though I'm not super familiar with Kepler, or at least I wasn't before a few phone confabs with him. So changes are in the mix, changes are coming, diversity is better seen. But let me be really clear for those naysayers and haters who are just grumbling if they're watching us or listening. I'm Gen X, so I was literally taught make change from inside an institution.
Yes.
And I'm partially have some toes still in that world. I didn't say earlier to a few gorgeous things you said in this conversation. I'm also, without getting too deep in my chart, I'm also Chiron and Aries. And that has been active in recent days, that placement. So part of what I'm thinking about is, I call it fresh snow.
Fresh snow.
I've had, and I think it's very common for a big chunk of, right? Because Chiron in Aries is about a 7-year span, if I've got it right.
Yep.
Chiron has a very irregular orbit, but
Yeah.
we're Gen Xers. Chiron and Aries are Gen Xers, period. And so I think there's a really important way I hadn't necessarily, or maybe I've grappled with, maybe I did think about it a long time ago, looking at my own astrology, that we're hesitant to pioneer, we're hesitant to strike a new path, a new trail in fresh snow. And there are more drastic ways and more lighter ways to see that. But I think fresh snow is right about the middle. And I grew up in the Midwest and went to school in Minnesota. So there's something really fun and beautiful about stepping into fresh snow and making that path across the street or across the way. But there's also something about, well, how packed is this snow? How wet is it? How is it going to seep into my boots or shoes or whatever footwear you do or don't have on? And there are many other things to say about that if we're talking about mud, which might be more not quicksand, but quicksand-like, and tugging and pulling at your not just footwear, right, but your feet, your whole person, and the stability we do or don't feel there. I want to shout out one of the biggest community stories in astrology, and it's very specifically about Black astrologers and Black experiences. And queer astrology, actually. And that's Mercury's Brood, which is an astrology anthology. Let me say that again. Mercury's Brood, and an astrology anthology that's forthcoming. They just did amazing numbers and amazing energy, and not just dollars, but people and tweets and Instagram posts and Facebook posts around getting the money to create this my language journal, this publication that centers Black voices, that honors them, Black voices in astrology, pardon me.
Nice.
And this is a queer helmed project. They had little of, and they
It's called
asked,
Mercury's Brood, and an astrology anthology, or an anthology of astrology. Wow.
this is groundbreaking, right? And I think they launched on the, pardon me, Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, right? The Great Conjunction or close thereof. But there's a lot here, and I still will unpack more of this in this presentation that I'll put online, and hopefully, and probably just ask for donations because it's labor. And we need to think about the labor, right? Hashtag Tauranus,
Right.
and who's paying for the labor. And this was part of the story of Mercury's Brood, and not only them, but they asked for 30,000 on Kickstarter. They got it relatively quickly, and I have a long running background with Kickstarters, which I don't think we talked about before, but from the vegan world, right?
Right.
And really, astrologers, for the most part, before, let's say, a handful of months ago, except for your teacher, one of your teachers.
Right. Yeah. Achita Baba.
Thank you. I was like, I don't know, I quite have the pronunciation
Right.
right.
It took me a while too.
He's been doing it for 6 years, but 7 times with great success. A lot there for people to look at. And now then a couple other astrologers did it before he did his annual in December. Nate Spear and Sabrina Monarch in the autumn, and I was in touch with them privately about their campaigns in different ways. Again, I have a lot of experience and success, mostly successes, not all, but mostly, helping to raise modest sums in the context of any money, particularly Kickstarter. And they did very well in their campaigns. And then I launched one, as you probably know, for the film short Black Astrologers yesterday, for a very modest sum, maybe too modest in retrospect. And then here comes Stormy Grace.
Right. Stormy's Academy.
A YouTube astrology academy with free classes with 3, if not 4, maybe even 5 dozen astrologers donating their time to teach what I understand is a comprehensive program over this next astrological year.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so proud of her.
And then here comes Mercury's Brood.
It's really popping.
Which blew through its numbers. I won't unpack all of that here because that gets Kickstarter geeky. But these are all important. These 3 Black, right? Mine first, chronologically, started first, and then the Stormies, and then Mercury's Brood. Collectively, we got 6 figures together, and Mercury's Brood by itself was pretty close to 6 figures, even though they only asked for the initial stated goal was 30,000 even. That's important for a few reasons. One of which is, at least from the data I can see, right, from my campaign, these were hugely astrologer funded. That's not how Kickstarter and my many other dozens of experiences works. Usually you have vegans, but you have your family, you have your friends, you have your coworkers, your mentors, your mentees, some exes,
right.
maybe their families, right? People we know a mix of people. I hope most humans do. And you reach out to them, right, to get the crowd, right? The crowd doesn't have particular demographics. What happened here, my perception, and certainly again looking at my data for my campaign, like who gave, and there's more there. It's hugely astrologers. That's not the pattern when I go back and look at vegan, which is a bigger community and broader reach in a few ways. And Kickstarters aren't new in the way that some of those campaigns, particularly for Vegucated, that first one I helped run and co-create back in 2011. It's that long ago, quite literally, June, July, or July, August. So I'm curious to see what other Kickstarters we're going to see, right? I think I just named 6 just in the last not even 6 months. All were successful for varying amounts in various projects. But 3 of those 6 are Black helmed or black. I think Stormy would say, if I've got it right, Black helmed, right? Black created, but purposely not exclusively Black or only. It's meant to be, right? Astrology is really for everyone. Freedom, as Prince Harry, or the former prince, or the prince. I don't know how to play with that. I wanted to play with that in a sort of princey, Prince the musician way, but I won't here. These are really big.
The expat, formerly known as Prince Harry.
There you go. That's big, right? How can you have all this privilege and access and traveling, I think, to all the continents, but not know? Well, he was very invested in something that isn't just a business for him. I think if we look at him as a person, maybe even him as a chart, but right, this is also his blood family, without going all the way back into that. You mentioned news earlier and them shifting. one of the things also with these listicles and other articles, I think the tarot astrology was 10, and I think you said Forbes, and I don't have the list committed to memory by any stretch or even written down. I'm kind of scared in a good way to go back and look, because part of me is like, will we ever see this peak of just article after article, and some really nice articles again, and over certainly days and weeks, but also months. I think the last one to drop at the end of 2020, I can't see the headline in my head, which often I can, but Sam Reynolds, that I think you know, and certainly is a friend and a collaborator of mine, and quote, big air quotes, neighbor here. He's still over in Jersey these days. He and two or three other astrologers were in a Business Insider article that talked about the $2 billion, I don't know, worth valuation, whatever the language is. It's a business, right? And
Astrology being a $2 billion?
and that's excluding India. India has a someone just reminded me in a astrology Facebook group. Um,
Jeez,
India, astrology is more respected and revered and has been for quote unquote.
always has been. Yes, never lost it.
It's a $10 billion industry just
Holy
within India.
moly!
And that's a US number. When I first saw it, I was like, what?
US dollars, 10
That's a
million.
US dollar.
Not rupees. This
It's
is,
not, I had to look up because I was like, wait, is that right?
yeah.
Well, it could be, but I hadn't seen that number.
I had no idea.
And again, it's right. It's bad word here, but it's entrenched there. It's nothing new. It's respected. It's,
Yes. Yeah. But still, I
highly
mean,
respected.
I'm still
Well,
impressed.
their technology is changing. So I've seen press releases about not call centers, but sort of call lines, like we saw here in the '90s with the renowned and sometimes infamous Miss Cleo.
Miss Cleo, right? I remember the psychic networks. That's what they, yeah.
Right, and Dionne Warwick and many other names there, and
So
also
they have like India's version of that. Yeah.
yeah, but it's different, right? Because they're certainly after the money, but it's different, and I don't know how because I'm not calling into these lines, but I wanted to call the name. Sorry, a lot of things ran through my head there. The late Walter Mercado was
Right.
involved, I think, not with the Indian lines, but the ones in the '90s, and certainly is an astrologer of color. It's amazing, and I want to say I have to go back and look at this in more detail and think about it. The $2 billion I mistakenly wrote or was about to write on Facebook just the last 2 or 3 days. Oh yeah, that's mostly from the apps, the astrology apps.
Wow.
No, that's not right.
No.
I think there's blur about what's astrology or not if we parse out where that 2 billion's from, let's say down to the 100 millions or even the tens of millions. But a good chunk of that is from consultation. The apps, there's certainly some fraction, and they're getting VC money or making their own.
Yes.
Like Channy's has no VC money very intentionally, right, and not being co-opted into
right
something else, or plural on that. Anyway, astrology is booming, as you well know, with classes and podcasts like we have here, classes / courses, conferences, in person and virtual, and summits and books, and we'll see what else, and there's a way that the news / media are paying attention to us because we've been on trend for a few years. We are astrologers / astrology somehow touching and connecting with millennials. And I think that's because astrology in some part is part of nature, capital N. It is, pause for water here.
Yes, water break.
Astrology in part is about stargazing, right? And observing the patterns and looking at the stories, as above, as below. And one of the things that strikes me, jumping back a little bit for a second, as a vegan, is that millennials globally want their veggies.
Yes,
they do. This for a few years, and there's data, and there's studies, and there's patterns, and you can see it here in New York City. I don't know about elsewhere in the U.S. I think in Canada, elsewhere in the Americas, where we're seeing Sweet Green, a restaurant chain, and some others, the names Dig In, I think here, New York City, and others that are these whole foods plant-based, but not necessarily vegan, but have vegan options and are serving Beyond Meat and
Sure.
Good Catch and Ocean Hugger and these other names, these different products that mimic or echo
Regular.
animal flesh, right?
Sure.
Animal product to eat. There was one other thing, two other things to mention that are top of mind about Black astrologers. So what maybe the biggest piece, I'm not sure how to measure it, and again, I don't have the list, but I remember June, July, I think it's Sam Reynolds, Susan Miller, and I think a woman astrologer of color. I'm not saying who's in the article off the top of my head. I think it's, and I'm forgetting her name, I Jade on Twitter with multiple A's. I think
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've seen her on Twitter. Yeah.
that
Great.
article in Newsweek, or Newsweek.com, I don't know if it made it into print or not. I need to actually maybe text Sam after we're done to find out. But it was on Newsweek.com. It definitely made the rounds. And it name dropped ISBA, International Society of Black Astrologers, which is not a formal org, but is a Facebook group. Now, this is about mid-year, at least the way I remember, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm, as you said in the opening, I help manage, admin this group with Sam, which he co-founded about six and a half years ago. ISBA has more than doubled its size in barely a year,
Wow.
partially because of that article, right, which was name dropped, which was stunning to me. I think he got that into another publication, maybe not as, as prominent as Newsweek, but he didn't tell me, just was kind of, look at this article. And I looked at it. That's huge.
That is.
And part of what we got immediately, right, from the group is only Black astrologers are allowed in, Facebook group, is I've been looking for something like this, right, which is trickier in a pandemic and you stay at home or you're supposed to,
Yeah.
and the mask and a lot of venues are closed. And it was just, I don't even know how to say. It's been amazing at many points in my involvement with astrology communities to welcome people who aren't necessarily welcomed, or they are welcome, but it's perfunctory. They aren't engaged. And I've heard this story from
not really seen or heard.
Yes, and really crucially, and again, this isn't just about color or queer. I hear it actually from a lot of women. I've heard it from numerous white women, usually younger here, meaning not a baby boomer, so Gen X, Gen Y, or Gen Z. But I've heard it from all types, and I've certainly have heard it for baby boomers, and I have heard it for white males. I've heard it from everybody, but there's some shape there if I were to recollect and do the data. But what's important to me as we move into further into this new paradigm, new age, or new era might be a better way to say it, is that we invite people, we welcome them, and we sincerely engage them. Because what I've heard over and over, not just among astrologer and astrologer groups, is, and this is where you start getting tokenism and bad feelings and all sorts of other things that are not really desirable. When you don't engage with that person, when they're not heard, when they're not seen, where they're not, not seen as invisible, or seemingly so, people don't come back. Right. And you don't change the Congress. You don't change your org membership. You don't evolve. And there's a weird way that sort of goes back into Meghan's story, if not Meghan and Harry's. I'm not sure I can unpack that in this moment. But again, if we're going to really talk about useful, from where I'm sitting, useful inclusion, invite, welcome, and sincerely engage. It doesn't mean you love them or blow smoke up their ass. I would invite people not to do that. It doesn't mean you even like them. But it means that we live in a plurality. We live in a functioning not dysfunctional, but functioning, healthy democracy. And there's a lot more to say off of that, but very different conversation.
You know what comes up to for me when you say that, Demetrius, is look at the nodal axis right now with the North Node in Mercury in Gemini and the South Node in Sag. The old paradigm was this, it was like the Vatican, you know, we have this pronouncement and everybody listens to what we have to say. But the North Node in Gemini is like, you know what, we're going to listen to each other and we're going to talk to each other and listen to each other. And it's not just one way, this high and mighty coming down off the mountain, you know, I proclaim that, you know, it's like that's the old way that's falling away. So yeah, isn't that interesting how it's all happening at that time with the Gem Sag axis, North Node, South Node? The fact that they're engaging, they want to hear from people, they're asking them questions, they want to engage conversation. That's exciting. That's different. Yes. Oh, I had a hello from my cat. Yes. Oh, you like that, don't you?
So there is a way that
I think it's I think it's all the things in air, not the least of which is North Node and Gemini, right? Very chatty, Kathy and Charles or Chris or what have you.
Yeah, it's way bigger than the nodal because it's going to go on for the next 200 years, not just a year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I was trying to go back to, I think, a useful thought, for at least myself, if not folks listening. Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius are all in some sort of dialogue with another, if not others. There's a pun in there somewhere, which just I've trained myself decades ago to let some of that Freudian out. And I think that's going to be maybe the key challenge. I don't know if I said this a little bit already today. We have to relate to each other, even if we're going to be divorced or split apart or in disagreement, certainly in love and in cooperation and collaboration. And there are many other ways to parse that, right? We're on the same, as far as I know, Earth plane, right? And climate crisis or crises necessitate that we look at those things, and there are other crises, clearly, about the paradigm that led us into the set of crises, plural, and back to the interview and other things there. One thing I want to say, add sort of to this list, some of the highlights, but not all of them, about happening in astrology this last astrological year and Black astrologers is, I mentioned ISBO, which again is not a formal org, but may become one in due time. Maybe a membership, maybe not. I don't know what that looks like. We'll see in the coming months or seasons.
Oh, I think it's definitely gonna be official.
Yeah. Well, I have questions there, and I'm more skeptical probably than it's one of its parents and my collaborator on that, Sam, and even what that group wants. And to parse that out a little bit more, I'm skeptical about membership orgs in general, and specifically astrological ones. And I'm still sorting through that. And keep in mind, I still am very much in that world, but also, Chiron and Aries, like what's an astrological org look like that's not membership driven, but might still serve community in ways, in dialogue, not reciprocity, but in the way you better just articulate it. There's a way these membership orgs have not for well over a decade, if not 2 or 2.5, maybe 3, listened to their memberships and changed with them, because they used to be much bigger. Astrology really had its heyday as far as number. Astrology orgs had their heyday in the 70s. I'll leave that. What I want to pivot to is something, I won't call their name here. I don't know if they want this on recording, but I was told a good few years ago by someone whose sun probably, or something on their chart aspects my Chiron and Aries. Demetrius, you've got to look beyond these orgs. They're just not going to do all of the things ever. Doesn't matter who's at the helm. It's not necessarily what they're designed for. It certainly isn't the times they're conceived in. And I was more drinking the Kool-Aid at this point. This is sort of at the tail end of the, what do you call it? The Uranus, Pluto squares, right?
Oh,
2012
okay.
2015.
Sure.
And what I've come to is, or at least where I'm at today is, and for a number of people get this, but this is very common among Black boomers and Gen Xers at least, right? Malcolm path or the Martin path. And right, and I'm born not too many years after their assassinations. And so
Mm,
that's always there of this uh, independence or interdependence is one way to think about that, particularly thinking about air, the air signs, and
mhm.
air signs really being about interdependence, and not this fantasy of rugged individualism. That just is out the window. I think that's one of the challenges of this moment. I was trying to connect it back. That's where I would have to go back and revisit this interview, at least the transcript with Meghan and Harry and Oprah. And I'm referring to that not to be annoying, sorry if it is for someone listening, but because that was a cultural moment. I would
Yes.
bank, I wouldn't make this bet usually, but I might actually bet, maybe the old iMac here as opposed to this one I'm using here, a computer on that, right? A very tall bet. Uh, and I'll leave that there. But I want to say something, not necessarily to toot my own horn, but yes, to embrace the Leo archetype, right?
All right.
Aquarians sometimes struggle with. But a couple of other important things happened around orgs, not orgs, in this question, at least in my lap on my physical desktop and digital. The first is one of the millennial astrologers to watch, who is a woman, who is queer, who is Black, Kira Taborn. Did a lot in 2020, which I'm still wrapping my head around. But one of the key things that Kira did when we talk about diversity and inclusion and moving forward, gosh, there's a few things that just popped in my mind. But the one I want to call out here, talking about, again, orgs, not orgs, or even orgs and businesses being for profit, but could still be mission driven. Not that nonprofits can't be. Is Kira took over Fresh Voices in Astrology, which is
Right. Astrology University.
well, it was right. Astrology University is growing quite a lot, and it's quite a lot of people and content and things and to manage it. There's more about the amazing Tony Howard, who is who is Astrology University, certainly with some staff help behind the scenes. But he was looking and had been looking for someone to take on Fresh Voices in Astrology, and it ends up with Kira, which is a great choice. Kira is a young millennial who loves community and has a lot of 11th house placements, has a lot of contacts, and is a very talented
Yeah, she's cool.
person and astrologer. And so it is functioning in a way that unfortunately a lot of the astrological orgs and even meetups have not been during COVID, which is it's got a monthly talk like a local in-person group, right, pre-pandemic. And not that people don't have stressors or need to necessarily keep all the things going. I get it. I myself am guilty of this in one of my hats. But anyway, Fresh Voices in Astrology has it's done an annual virtual summit of astrologers pushing more faces and voices of color in astrology, age range, LGBTQ plus, and otherwise, and produced the third one back in August 2020, just coming off of weeks away from QAC 20, I call it Queer Astrology Conference. And that's one of the other big things, probably the biggest thing for me that happened professionally. And there were many. I had to go back, again, shout out to Sam Reynolds, who said, you had a banner year, meaning 2020. And it wasn't all easy, and a lot of it was uncomfortable for me. But I was like, what is he talking about? And I had to go back and remember, oh shit, that was all in calendar 2020. And literally from day one, January 1st, almost all the way to the end of the year. Started with Starstruck Astrology, a virtual summit that I helped co-produce and was brought in to help bring in more diversity and diversity in a lot of ways, not just about race and not necessarily just about, I call it Rainbow Tribe, LGBTQ plus, but in some other ways about different thinking and different techniques because there's so many in astrology. And then basically concluding with this Kickstarter that was scary as fuck to be playing. And they almost always are, even when I haven't been in the driver's seat proper, which is most of the time. Usually I'm a front seat driver, occasionally back seat driver. But this was all me. It's just scary without parsing that out here. But I ended up single parenting as the language, Queer Astrology Conference 2020. It was an enormous virtual conference. Um, Majority BIPOC astrologer roster. We hadn't seen that before for a conference. We had
Yeah.
by way of a summit, by way of the first two at that point. This is July 2020. Um, Fresh Voices in Astrology. Um, there's a lot more to unpack, which I won't do here because we've been chatting a while.
Yeah,
Or I
it's been
have
over an
been.
hour. Woo!
But
This has been
I
a good
just want
one.
to say that there was a lot of ground broken. There was a lot of success. There were some failures definitely on my desk, but there was movement onward, right? We had that uh, brief but potent stint of Saturn in Aquarius, quote unquote, the spring of 2020 if you look at the calendar,
Yep.
and the astrology of it, quote unquote. But what happened with there, I think, particularly the global protest in response, I think you used the word galvanized around, again, not just George Floyd's murder, but the way we saw it, right? Again, back to social media and news and media and the smartphones and the technology, Aquarius, arguably there. Um, Many other thoughts and many other things to say, but I do think things are in the world, and certainly specific to astrology and astrologers, are turning a corner. They're shifting. They're moving on. I don't think that, and I've said this, I think, 2 or 3 times already in this conversation. I want to say again, I don't think they'll all be good. I don't. I don't think they'll be. I'm not sure if we'll see unicorns and rainbows. Maybe. I think we'll see things like that for sure. I don't think it will be all bad. I don't think it will all be good. I think it'll be a mix. I think when we look at any transit or ingress astrologically aspect, I think we can find great stories. We can find ugly stories. We can
Yeah.
find multiple stories attached. I think it's important as astrologers and even people consulting astrologers or tarot readers or mediums or what have you, or just life coaches, business coaches, whatever, that we try to, we not just try, we work to do better, right? There's so many tools out here. A lot of them just being knowledge. Certainly
Yeah.
Zoom is out here and Clubhouse and. And I know everybody doesn't have access, particularly Clubhouse, right? Which is only iOS, only on Apple for the moment. I'm excited about the year ahead, the months ahead, the days ahead, the decade ahead,
Yeah.
and trying to stay largely in curiosity and more joy than not. And some of that is to stay upright. I'll leave that there.
As we move into the unknown, that whole Uranus kind of not knowing, but being okay with not knowing.
You know, it's funny that you say that. This is one of my bailiwicks, hobby horses. I don't know what it's called, but I have a particular, in a few ways, Uranus placement. I don't think Uranus or I think Neptune or Pluto are more quote unknowable.
Yeah, Neptune. Yeah. For sure.
I think Uranus often
I think of the shock, surprise, like that kind of unknown, like, oh, didn't see that coming. Shocking. Anyway.
My working premise is we do comprehend, not to be confused with seeing it coming, which is very different than my experiences and what I understand about Neptune and Pluto. Because Uranus is so precise, often to the clocks, a Swiss clock second.
Yes.
I think part of the shock or surprise is sometimes, not all the time, it's so big or so stunning or so jolting or so much or so quick But often I'm hearing people say, well, after the Uranus square conjunction, whatever, they didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming. They didn't see it. But they did kind of know, and this is particularly astrologers, but even the non-astrologers. I don't know. There's a nuance there. I'm trying to suss out, particularly at the decade ahead and when before Uranus gets to Gemini. I think Uranus is, I haven't articulated it yet, or I haven't in many months or weeks or whatever it is. I think I have somewhere in my journal. I invite astrologers in particular and people otherwise. I think all of the planets, even the three outers, are willing to communicate and indicate and hint and even just flat out say, this is what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge, I think, for all of the planets, and maybe more so with the outers, is us to embrace the grandiosity of that change. Humans don't like change in general, me included. And so the outers, I think, push us in each in their own right, in each in their own flavorings of the planet and certainly the sign and on aspects they make. Uranus is the quickest of the three, which for some is like, but there's also something clean about if I can use this, borrowing from you for a second, Mars, the cut that it makes.
Right.
The irrevocable.
Swift.
The very swift, clean break. It's not a cut break, I think is the word, right? The breakthrough, the eureka, right, is a very Aquarian, pardon me, Uranus, quote unquote Uranian without Uranian / Uranian astrology, cosmobiology. Anyway, there's other thoughts there that hopefully I'll articulate better a different day. I want to thank you for chatting with me and
absolutely always great.
Observe some of what's out there and some of what's been
and what's to come
and some of what's coming. Many other thoughts, but I think that's plenty for me to chew on. Hopefully,
right? All of us. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be chewing on this for quite a while. But yeah, that's I'm so grateful for this time, and I appreciate you giving your time so generously. You're always so good like that. If people want to participate in Queer Astrology Conference, Black Astrologer, or the film short Black Astrologers Yesterday, you have ongoing research. We should tithe you. This is important for the society. How can people get in touch with you? And
I welcome
Black Astrology Conference, Queer Astrology Conference.
Thank you. And I almost forgot. Sorry to my Leo side, right? Or just my Leos out there, including you. These are different things. I welcome tithing and support, and probably we'll do another fundraising, crowdfunding, but not through Kickstarter here in a second. And it's ongoing. People can go to blackastrotoday.com and learn a little bit more about this film short, Black Astrologers Yesterday, that I am early on in the research on, looking at Benjamin Banneker is how I imagine the short will start. He's a fascinating American figure, quote unquote American in of himself. And I say quote unquote because there are two Americas, folks. There are two. And so this is not America, even though that's how we use it colloquially. There's a lot going on with that if we want to talk about colonization, but different conversation. So that's where the film short, people can also sign up for the soon to come.
I'm going to put that in the underneath, a link to that.
Thank you. The podcast, which is actually what begat the film short. The podcast is called it's not out yet, but it's coming, Black Astrologers Today. And I've recorded a few episodes of that with some amazing folks, partially selfishly for me, just to get to know some of the folks that are out there at all, and some better. So that's coming this spring. And overlaps and necessarily as a sibling to the Black Astrologers Yesterday. We will see here in a second or two, not a Black Astrology conference, but a summit. To be
Nice.
playing the conference, as you may recall, was for a Black audience only. That was by multiple people's request. We did that. It was a successful event. That was back in October. It was small for some, maybe obvious reasons, maybe not. And some of that was my energy was flagging between
Right.
COVID and the census and the election, and then a roommate search at that point, which flipped into a very dramatic Uranus transit,
Right.
Uranus to my ICMC search. But I digress. What am I saying? Look for
Summit.
A summit, which would be open to everyone to attend, but a fully black roster in the coming months. I'll just leave that there. I'm not quite sure on the date. I need to elect a chart and see, because the date I want lights up my chart, particularly my Uranus, and I'm like, I don't know if I get into that.
I think I need a break. Right.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm like, can I harness this? But Uranus doesn't necessarily want to be, even though it might be the lightning rod, may or may not want to be harnessed.
No, it's not its nature.
Switching lanes, Queer Astrology Conference 2020's content is hugely out there. People can go to qastro.org, and that will jump to the more complicated URL that I inherited. Again, I am at the helm of Queer Astrology, which is it's a project. It's not an organization similar to ISPA. I don't know that it will become an org. I'm still going back and forth about that, but it will continue on. It's been around since 2013.
Wow.
And there's content from the prior 4 conferences, audio up on the site. There's audio and video for 2020. We didn't talk about it here explicitly, but I'll just briefly say, even though we're in the, without me going into the weeds, it's the most political of content of any astrologer conference. Keeping in mind, you said at the very top, I have been involved with over 30 astrologer conferences. And I say astrologer because if you don't speak a little bit of astrologies, the language of astrology, you'll probably get lost very quickly. Right. Particularly with these talks, which are not assuming newbie, like pre-beginner, if you will, sort of a kindergarten. You got to be, in junior high, well, in elementary school, however you want to parse that of astrology. But qastro.org, Black Astro Today. I'm on Twitter lightly these days to do this research and just to recover from the chump era. Vegan D, EGAND, a D as in dog on the end there. And you can find me elsewhere online. I'm not as popular as many others, which is fine, but I'm certainly hope I'm not invisible after this time. You asked one other thing. I don't know when the next QAC is. It may or may not, to be plain, happen in 2021. I'm trying to personal reveal. I have progressed Moon in Taurus, and I am finally learning at a whole different experiential level. Or not finally, but better learning what Taurus is and is not. And Taurus does not want to try to do all of the things, at least the way I'm experiencing it. And so I'm sloughing a lot off. So I do think we'll see into autumn a Queer Astrology conference or summit, but I'm not quite ready. I'm still processing the 2020 event. I think that's everything you asked me.
Yeah.
There and then some.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of that good stuff. And like I said, the links will be below. And so, yes, onward. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate seeing you and getting all the news. And thank you so much. I can't say enough. And for all that you do and all that I know how producers, like having been in the PR world for most of my life before astrology, the unsung heroes, the ones behind the scenes, is the power behind the throne. It's always, those are the ones that are holding the lines together and making things happen. So we're just, shout out to you. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I yes to all of that. And I love it.
Yeah. You do what you love. Mwah. All right. Peace out.
Out.
All right. Thanks so much. So this has been episode 91, StarSound Speaks, StarSound Astrology. Thank you all for listening. Until next time, see you soon. Bye for now.